Welcome back inside the Millvale Studios for this June 24th, 2016. This is Gikes Got Game, and it's a Gikes Got Game double team edition of the show. I'm Matt Geica, along with my good friend and freelance journalist in the Pittsburgh area, Alan Saunders. We're going to talk mostly Pirates and Penguins over the course of the next hour or so, but anything is up for grabs. Whatever comes into our head, that will be spouted out in your direction. Thank you for listening. We are available 24/7. Well, the broadcast is available. The radio station is available 24/7, streaming local music in addition to talk programs at riversedgepgh.com. You can find our show both live and in the archive, and each of our shows has its own page at riversedgepgh.com. It's all there for you. And good to be back. Alan, thanks for coming in. You and I just got finished covering a Pirates game as the Pirates lost 3 of 4 to the Giants at PNC Park, this being recorded on a Thursday evening. Dark times for the Pirates. It was a dark day, first of all, in Pittsburgh on Thursday. This show running Friday morning, first time, of course. But you and I were there for a couple of dispiriting losses for the Pirates at the end of this series, and now they've dropped 20 of their last 26, 5 games under 500. Everything has gone south for them, including the offense, which scored 6 runs on Wednesday night, but still went the final 6 without getting a single one across. So even that lineup that carried them for so long has had some rough patches lately too.
Yeah, it's almost like everything is going wrong at the same time. Not only are they not hitting as well as they were, they're still not getting good pitching. They're good pitching. The bad starts they're getting is exposing their bullpen. They're dealing with some injuries too, which I don't think many people are talking about as a reason for the struggle, but they're missing Garrett Cole. They've gone 2 days without Starling Marte. They're missing Francisco Cervelli. I mean, those are big pieces of the puzzle there that aren't involved. And so I think it's just a case of everything that possibly could have gone wrong with this Pirates team is going wrong right now.
And it's a rare thing under Clint Hurdle. June has usually been a strong month for them. I'm not sure that adds up to anything repeatable, but it is an odd look for this team to be stumbling and struggling as much as it has been. We'll get into the Pirates much more later on in this program. Also coming up, I kill the cliche, and I bring you my final number for the week. But opening segment, first period of the show, if you will. Alan, the NHL draft begins this weekend in Buffalo, New York. And while the Penguins don't have a first-round pick yet, it's funny how much the NHL draft has become maybe the premier event at which where GMs can wheel and deal and figure things out and maybe work out some trades and see how they start to develop their team for the coming season. And with the Penguins, who feels like they just literally finished up on the ice at San Jose, and now you've got to spin it forward if you are Jim Rutherford and Associate GM Jason Botterill and all the rest of their front office staff. It's time to look to 2016-17. And the first thing that may change for the Penguins coming up here in the new year is their goaltending situation. And you and I discussed this last week a bit briefly, but there have been reports that the Calgary Flames are interested in Marc-Andre Fleury. Jim Rutherford has denied there's been any real kind of trade talks, but people out there in the game know that the Penguins are probably going to have to move Marc-Andre at some point, considering the expansion draft coming up and Matt Murray's play and the fact that he's much younger, much cheaper. How do you see this playing out over the next couple of days, over this weekend? Do you think that Fleury will be shipped out over the course of this draft?
I don't know. There's a lot of reasons to suggest that he might, and that's obviously everything you just mentioned, that the draft has become this sort of big trading day and big moving day in the NHL, and the other thing is that the rules for the expansion draft have just sort of been formalized, and so I think a lot of general managers were sort of waiting for that shoe to drop just to be sure of exactly the rules of engagement for how this was going to go. And now that they're out there and seem to be pretty much in order, I think that will allow some teams to really go ahead and make some more deals with that expansion draft in mind, perhaps. I think the bottom line with the Penguins and Fleury is that it is an expansion draft move. I think if it wasn't for the expansion draft, I think Jim Rutherford, it would take Marc-Andre Fleury stating publicly that he wanted to leave Pittsburgh for Jim Rutherford to make that deal this offseason. Maybe down the road, sure, see how things happen next season. But I think if Jim Rutherford had it his way, he'd go into the season with 2 goaltenders. And, I can still see it happening. It's not like the Penguins are going to get a lot from Marc-Andre Fleury. They don't have a ton of leverage in this trade. And he'll clear up some cap space, but not a ton. If they lose Fleury, then they're going to have to sign a backup goaltender, which is going to cost money. And it's not like they can allocate that money to some big long-term project, because if you decide you're keeping Matt Murray, you're going to have to sign him to a big contract starting the following season anyway. I think he would trade Marc-Andre Fleury for what he feels like is the right trade, something that's going to make the team better this coming season. But then what are you going to get? Are you going to get a piece that comes back with salary? Because then that eliminates the salary cap implications of trading Fleury. If you get a first-round draft pick, maybe that's great, but that doesn't help the Penguins win games this coming season. And with the number of players they have coming back from a championship team, they're poised to repeat, maybe more so than any team has in recent NHL history. When Chicago won, they had big salary cap problems coming up the very next year every single time. The Kings sort of had the same thing. They had those rookies that they had to pay on that 70s line. And I think the Penguins are the first team to win the Cup and escape it without some roster nightmare. And then the NHL goes and expands and sort of creates one for them. But I do think that Jim Rutherford would really like to keep Marc-Andre Fleury. He will make a trade if maybe the right deal is out there. But I think the right deal for Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be hard to find. And it's more likely that Marc-Andre Fleury gets traded in the season for a bad deal, with quotes, than right now. There doesn't seem to be, to me, right now, a reason to make a bad trade for Marc-Andre Fleury, unless Fleury does say, look, I really want out. In which case, he'll just get whatever he can for him and move on. The other thing about the draft weekend that I find interesting when it pertains to Jim Rutherford is that his first season with the Penguins, he went out and made a big splash on the draft weekend, made the trade for James Neal for Patrick Hornquist and some other pieces. And to be honest, that might be the worst trade he made as a Penguins general manager. Not because Patrick Hornquist is not a fabulous player, because he is, but asset-wise, he didn't get anywhere near the kind of value that he could have gotten for James Neal. And then the next summer, he's in intense negotiations with Toronto for Phil Kessel, and that deal doesn't happen at the draft. Famously, there's this big argument amongst the Penguins general manager and staff about that trade not happening.
Forgot about that.
At the draft.
Yeah.
And then it happens to a week later in a deal that everyone loved. And part of that, I do believe, was they waited out Toronto and they said, we don't have to make this trade at the draft. We can wait. And I think they got a better deal because of it. And so I think that reason may lead Jim Rutherford to patience with Marc-Andre Fleury in this situation.
I would advise patience. And by the way, you're listening to Gikes Got Game, some hockey talk here late in June, as we do here. Matt Geica with Alan Saunders. The point you brought up about the team being competitive, being positioned to repeat, I feel that's not a point that people are thinking about a lot. At least some of the people I've conversed with on Twitter and other social media, just talking to them in person. Everyone seems to forget that, or not forget, but they downplay the idea that next year is important for the Penguins because it could be their best shot in the next 5, 6, who knows how many years to win it again. And to collect the cups, that's the point of this whole endeavor. So keeping Marc-Andre around, at least to see how Matt Murray handles his first full season, I think is absolutely critical. And we know that Jim Rutherford likes to have goaltending depth. You brought that up too. So while I guess I wouldn't be surprised to see something happen at this draft, I also would be more surprised than not if he doesn't take 2 goalies, 2 legitimate goaltenders, Fleury and Murray, into the 2016-17 season. And I know that Matt Murray is I still consider him a prospect in my eyes, actually, because I still feel like we haven't seen enough to definitely at least establish some sort of a baseline at the top level of the game. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that was pretty easily pointed out when at the NHL awards ceremony, Matt Murray still eligible for the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year next season. Hasn't even crossed that threshold yet. So yeah, he's a work in progress. He's and he's obviously a work in progress. I don't think anyone that's really paying attention would suggest that he isn't. I mean, he had trouble with some serious things that are going to be a problem if he doesn't get them resolved. And I think maybe more so than just, you bring up a player and they're young and maybe they're inconsistent, or maybe they haven't reached the full potential that you saw at a lower level. When you see something where an opponent is able to repeatedly take advantage of a weakness, like we saw from plays from behind the net, like we saw on his glove hand, and dipping that left pad just a little bit too quickly. When you see those structural issues, I think that is really, to me, a big red flag for handing Matt Murray the reins and saying, you're the goalie, go play 65 games. I would be very hesitant to do that if I were the Penguins, and I do think any trade of Marc-Andre Fleury would absolutely necessitate a seriously quality backup, and the free agent market at goaltender is very, very soft this offseason. If you're looking at guys, with a .915 save percentage, somewhere in that range, it's Jonas Enroth, it's
is Thomas Greiss available, or did the Islanders sign him? I forget. Long term,
I think his numbers were down pretty significantly this past season. But yeah, he's available. But it's there isn't a player out there that I saw that I think the Penguins could get as a backup that you would also feel comfortable with taking over a starting role. And I think when you're talking about a guy that's played 13 NHL games, I think that should almost be part of the minimum criteria for that backup. So then if you think, well, we can get that guy, I don't know. I just think it'd be very difficult for the Penguins to make a trade for Marc-Andre Fleury before the season that makes the team better this season. And, there's a lot of talk about there, well, they have to trade him because they can't afford to lose him. I don't know. If they keep him and they win the Stanley Cup and they lose him, is that
a big deal, right?
Is that the end of the world? I mean, you're not going to get much for him in a trade anyway. You clear $5.75 million of cap space. Maybe he gets through. Maybe they don't want him.
Yeah, it's no guarantee he gets chosen in the expansion draft.
I don't think that there is a gun to Jim Rutherford's head that says Marc-Andre Fleury must leave the Penguins before the end of the season at all.
Well, there you go. You convinced me. It's all set. He's going to stay the rest of the year. I would do it. And for reasons you said, and also I still think he's the better goalie. If you look at it,
certainly this coming season.
For 2016-17, I think he is the better goalie. 17-18, then we have a discussion, I think. And, well, what do you even think Fleury's value is? How is he perceived, and is it possible that he's worth the most to the Penguins next season as opposed to on some other team that might be desperate for a goaltender like the Calgary Flames, as we brought up earlier in this one?
I think Fleury is pretty much a league average goaltender that's been an extremely reliable league average goaltender for a very long time.
Yeah, durable. We don't think about
very
that.
Durable.
But outside the concussion issues, there hasn't been much.
He has playoff experience. He's won a Stanley Cup. He's won 2 Stanley Cups, but he won 1 Stanley Cup.
Right.
And I think his salary kind of looks high, but really that's what you pay on the open market. You're not going to get a free agent goaltender of the caliber of Marc-Andre Fleury for any less than what he's getting paid.
Right.
So he's paid market value. He's signed to a contract for, I believe, 3 more seasons.
Yeah. Yes, 3 more. I checked on that recently. So there you go.
I think he has a good amount of value in a conceptual sense. But I think it's going to be very difficult to get that value out of a trade because of the circumstances surrounding the Penguins. With Matt Murray having seemingly surpassed him on the depth chart with the upcoming expansion draft, I think the other general managers are going to smell blood, and they're not going. I think going to be very hesitant to give up what would be fair market value for a league average goaltender signed to a very reasonable contract, a durable guy. You look at Corey Schneider, got the number 9 overall pick a couple years ago. He was a little bit younger, but very
less proven. Yeah.
But he had never been a full-time starter when the Devils made that trade.
That's right.
So, I mean, if the Penguins could get the number 9 overall pick, do you make that trade? I think that's
Number 9.
I think that's right about like 10. If you get the 10th pick for Marc-Andre Fleury, I think that's when the Penguins have to seriously consider pulling the trigger. I think less than that, and value, comes in different forms. It could be a prospect, could be a player on a very favorable contract, whatever. But I think that amount of value is about where the Penguins would have to seriously consider doing something this weekend.
Yeah, the top 10 is where you start to think if we draft this guy, he could even play for us next season. That's where that is a totally reasonable expectation, and that goes into trying to win next season. So I would get that. I doubt they do get that type of an offer, even if the ask is high, which it should be at this point. But yeah, time is on Jim Rutherford's side, and I'm looking this up right now. Marc-Andre makes $5.75 million a year. So probably just barely on the higher end of starting goaltenders, I guess, in the NHL. I'm not even sure where that ranks.
He's somewhere in the high teens as far as
really? That's,
numbered ranked contracts by goaltenders. So yeah, about average for an NHL starter.
Yeah, it's not Henrik Lundqvist money, but Marc-Andre is not Henrik, and he does have value, but he's not quite at that level where it'd be, I think, a no-brainer for a team to try to empty out their farm system or whatever to get him under control. So it's an interesting situation, but sorry, go ahead.
Let me just throw out an interesting thought I had, in that maybe the best option for the Penguins is to trade him to the Las Vegas team. They're going to be able to make trades before the NHL draft next offseason.
Okay, so there's a chance.
And whoever ends up being that general manager, by the way, Jason Botterill is expected to be a candidate for that job. Whoever ends up being that general manager, I think if I'm Jim Rutherford, that's the first phone call. Hey, we have 2 goaltenders. This one's pretty good. He's under contract. You're going to need 3. That might be the best deal.
This whole Las Vegas situation just throws everything into a different lens, I think, for viewing how the Penguins might be able to handle this situation. Heck, they're probably going to wear the same colors anyway, so it'd be a nice transition for Mark, as he'll just keep the same gear maybe going over there. I'm pretty sure they're going to wear black and Vegas gold, so Pens are going to Pittsburgh gold, Vegas going to Vegas gold. That'll make a lot of sense. Before we go, what do you think about the leverage thing we brought up? Does the leverage thing even matter? Are GM's going to say, well, the Penguins have to make this move, so I'm going to hold out, or I'm going to give them, or I'm going to offer them less? Does that really happen, or do teams just say, we need a goalie, and we're going to offer what it takes to get him?
I think it might happen less with goaltenders because there aren't as many of them available. But it definitely happens. Look at Phil Kessel. I mean, Phil Kessel held all the cards in his trade. He had a very selective no-trade clause, and he had a huge salary cap that only a certain number of teams could accept. And then the Penguins basically dictated the terms of that trade to Toronto. They said, we'll take Phil Kessel, and this is who you're going to take. And it absolutely happens. There are other situations like that, we've seen where, a player doesn't want to sign, or a player's unhappy and requests a trade, or a team like Chicago gets in big salary cap trouble, and the Islanders come and swipe one of their top young defensemen, and Nick Leddy for a second round pick, I think. Obviously Nick Leddy was worth a lot more than a second round draft pick at that time, but everybody knew that Chicago had to make a trade to get under the cap, and so
they were a little tighter with their assets. Okay, so that's what's facing Jim Rutherford. If he wants to make that move, he'll be a busy boy, as will the rest of his staff this weekend at the NHL draft in Buffalo. We'll step aside when we come back on Gikes Got Game. Pirates talk. I know we have to do it, though, because things are getting critical down at PNC Park, as this team is threatening to take a big step back. Not just a small step back, but a big step back in 2016. This is Gikes Got Game on the River's Edge.
Hi, I'm Tom, and I know money.
And I'm Matt, and I know funny.
Catch us Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. Real financial information
For the regular guy.
right here at riversedgepgh.com.
Your voice for local music.
Back for the second period. I'm Matt. He's Alan. This is Gikes Got Game. Double teaming you on this Friday morning if you're listening live or watching live. If not, thank you for checking us out at riversedgepgh.com. Either way, and some hockey talk regarding Marc-Andre Fleury and his trade value and what Penguins GM Jim Rutherford might be able to get for him if he elects to move him. There's no guarantee on that. Alan, you brought up the possibility that the Penguins would trade Fleury to the new Las Vegas team. That's right. It's been confirmed. The NHL is expanding to Las Vegas. Just one team expansion. So it'll be 31 teams for at least a little bit. That's kind of weird. Unbalanced. I'm not sure how that's going to, if that's going to play out long term, what they do in terms of evening the conferences out at some point or another. Of course, they're not even now. It was 16 in the East and 14 in the West, but no name for the Vegas team. That's going to be put off until the fall. Early thoughts of yours on what might be an appropriate moniker for the NHL's 31st franchise?
I don't have a good feeling about it, but I don't think it needs to be some kind of Vegas-y gambling reference.
Seems to be the popular perception on that.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily
the Aces.
A good thing. The Aces is a great name.
It's not bad.
I would be okay with that one. But I just don't think there's really a need for there to be. That's a minor league thing. There's not a need for it to be somehow relatable to the city. Just pick a good name, roll with it, move on.
Pittsburgh Penguins. I often think if Pittsburgh was getting an expansion team this year and someone proposed Penguins, who would like that? It was not a very popular pick back then. Some may forget. I was not around back then, neither were you, but it was proposed by the initial owner's wife, I want to say, and they were supposed to wear black and white as like a penguin would, as a penguin does, with its, I think that's like really tiny like feathers. Anyway, I don't know my
ornithology.
Ornithology, yes, that's right. We have to go down to the aviary to learn more about the real penguins. But I don't think that would be a very popular pick if it were chosen today.
Well, I think it was sort of a play on the Igloo nickname
was,
that the building already had. So I guess it did have that sort of local thing that we're talking about there. But yeah, I mean, it's not a great. I mean, Maple Leaf.
Yeah, that is kind of ridiculous.
I think the older a name is, like, the more ridiculous it's allowed to be without any amount of criticism. Like the Cubs and the Bruins are both essentially baby bears. There's nothing particularly threatening or menacing or.
I like how Boston Bruins sounds. I think that was a real winner in terms of the alliteration and.
I mean, I guess
how it comes off the tongue.
Is it better than Bears? I mean,
Boston Bears.
What was wrong with Bears? Like,
Bears.
You know, it's if they're really old names, they can be ridiculous and it doesn't matter. Like Red Sox. You know,
Reds or White Sox. Why are we naming them after
hosiery?
Yeah, pieces of laundry.
Anyway, yeah, I just think come up with a good name, regardless of what its relation to the city. And
what is a good name then? How do you define that?
I don't know. I think most good names are something, fierce or somehow. Nashville Predators, I think it's a great name.
That is a good one.
And they did have the little local connection because there was like a saber-toothed tiger.
The fossil or the skeleton, whatever was found there.
But I mean, that's just a great name regardless. So I don't know. They're out there. I'll come up with one.
As long as it's not some overly cutesy, like you said, minor league name, like what was it? The Hartford Yard Goats. They were that name was changed this year in minor league baseball. I don't know what a yard goat is, but
a yard goat is a train, I believe.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's like the little train that just pushes cars around the yard. The yard.
Well, I know the mascot is a literal goat. I'm pretty sure because they played off that.
Are they in the Eastern League?
Yeah, they're a Double-A.
So when they play the curve, that's like multiple railroad references.
Oh man, overload.
Is there an Engineers in that league too somewhere? I don't know.
Altoona Curve. Is that a good name? I always liked how that sounded. I'm not a fan of the singular names for teams because it makes it awkward for when you talk about it. What pronoun do you use, a singular or a plural? I always went plural in kind of like the English tradition where they say England are winning and all that type of thing.
I actually think the English do that better than we do.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on that. It's just easier.
And I love Curve because it's the local reference and it's a baseball.
Yeah.
So you kind of get the
Double whammy.
Yeah, 2 for 1 there. I like that a lot.
Double entendre. That's what we're talking today on Gikes Got Game. What were we supposed to talk about this segment? Oh, yeah, we wanted to go more into the draft and what the Penguins might do. They don't have a first-round pick, but what do the Penguins need? You and I were bandying this in the PNC press box today, recording this on a Thursday. But you look at the AHL roster, or the proposed AHL roster, there are some interesting forwards there. Of course, you have Daniel Sprong, who's going to be out for a while. Jake Gensel, nice college player who came on late in the season. But we had a difficult time naming the defensemen who are going to be in the AHL next season for the Pens. So I guess I answered my own question with that one.
Yeah, the Penguins were known for quite a long time as having this large group of very talented defensive prospects, and guys like Brian Dumoulin, Derek Pouliot, Oli Mata, Scott Harrington. I think I'm even missing a couple, but they're all gone.
Yeah.
Or at least the cupboard is now completely bare at defense. And I do think they have 2 picks at the end of the second round, 50, 55 and 61, something like that.
That sounds right. I don't know about the exact number, but yes.
And I think that's a good place for picking sort of mildly overlooked defensemen in the in the NHL draft. I do think that's when you get through the first round and you lose sort of all the sure thing players, I think in the second round a lot of teams go for more of a boom or bust sort of approach, where they look at the raw talent more than the actual results.
Daniel Sprong.
Yeah, there you go. But that's also one of the reasons why the Penguins went 20 years without a second-round draft pick making a reasonable contribution to the team. I think
Robert Deme.
I think Mark Recchi was the second-round pick.
I remember Deme. Was he a second-rounder?
He was a first-round pick.
He was a first-rounder. Okay, one of the flameouts.
They went a very, very long time in between. I think it was like between Recchi and Chris Letang were consecutive second-round picks that did anything. And so I think in that vein, that's a good place to take maybe a defenseman that's not necessarily a sure thing, but is or maybe not necessarily a number 1 defenseman prospect, but is just going to be a very good, solid overall player for you, like an Oli Mata type. Although he was obviously
like a Brian Dumoulin, maybe.
Yeah, well, that Brian Dumoulin was taken at the end of the second round, actually. So that's sort of a perfect example of I think the kind of player they can get there, and the kind of player they need. So I think that's the defensive pool is very dry. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go defense, depending on the players that are there, to be honest.
The Penguins' first-round pick, in case you're wondering, was sent over to Toronto, which was then sent to the Anaheim Ducks in the Frederik Andersen deal just a couple of days ago. Frederik Andersen, a goaltender, so there's an example of what a guy who has a decent track record in the NHL can fetch. And okay, so it's 55 and 61 for the Pens at the end of the second round. That's where they will select. We'll see if they can get into the first round. But when you are the Stanley Cup champions, you do pick later on. That's just the fact of the matter. In fact, you pick last in each round, guaranteed. And that's where there'll be 7 rounds in the draft. And I'm excited about the prospect of Austin Meadows going first overall, a kid who trained, or at least grew up, in Arizona, played his youth hockey in Arizona, and then went on to the U.S. National Development Program in Ann Arbor to kind of put a capper on that, and then played professionally overseas in Switzerland, so that's always been impressive to me. And then you have the 2 Finns who are up near the top, and their names escape me right now. But
it's Patrick, and I don't know how to pronounce it. Lane, L-A.
I think it's something like that.
Line. And then Jesse Puljujärvi.
That's a great name.
Yes, it is.
Good hockey name. Puljujärvi. So, in some order,
another American, Matthew Tkachuk, right up there with them too.
Always in the hockey draft, there's the son of former NHL player Keith Tkachuk is the guy that you might remember from before. Matthew, very tastefully named son of Keith, and who else was it? Jeff Chychrun's son is in the draft.
Yes, Jacob.
Well. Jacob, yeah,
He's
right.
One of the higher-rated Canadian players in the draft. It's a family game. Sort of always has been. You look at the Stalls, the Sutters, Wayne Gretzky's brothers. There's always been that sort of the Hulls.
Mm-hmm. Why is that? I always wondered that. Is it just the relatively small talent pool when it was more of a Canadian game?
I think that's a big part of it. The other thing is hockey's not an easy sport to get into if it's not in your sort of heritage. You know, if you're from Tennessee or Alabama or Arizona before Austin Matthews, even now, it's not an easy sport to get into. So I think if you're talking about some athletic DNA with a father who played the sport, I think that, you know, that's sort of a prime real estate for a potential hockey player. And that's probably why it happens at a higher level.
And it's a game for the most part, not affluent people, but you have to have some money to play it. So
you can't be dirt poor and spend $500 on pads and skates every year. That's not going to happen.
That's been a concern in the sport of soccer too, is making it not a suburban game, and why it seems like America can't quite get the amount of talent that other countries do. In most countries, it's a very democratic sport. You just need a ball to play, but the system that's been built up around youth soccer in America, similar to youth hockey, it has those barriers. I guess lacrosse is another one of those sports, you know, mostly white, mostly middle class to upper middle class. So for whatever reason, these barriers have been built up in our country that don't exist in other countries. So that's something that will always, I think, be a challenge in hockey.
But I think, as you said, it's good to see, you know, Austin Matthews.
Yeah, he's
Scottsdale, Arizona,
breaking through that, and a different type of a prospect. And I can't imagine going over to Switzerland and playing pro hockey at age 18. His mom moved over there with him, so that always helps. She can cook the meals, and
I think it's important to talk about why he did that too, and sort of the little minutia there. And that, so if you're a North American player and you're drafted at 18, you can't play in the American Hockey League until you're 20. And you either have to play for a college team or you have to play for a junior team, and you really can't start your pro career until you get to that age 20. And that's sort of the trap that Daniel Sprong fell into this year for the Penguins, where he wasn't quite good enough to play for the Penguins, was probably way too good to play in the Quebec Major Junior League, but that's where he spent his season anyway, because those are the rules. So for Austin Matthews, by moving to Switzerland, he gets drafted as a European player, and he could play in the American Hockey League this coming season if he ends up in that same sort of boat, I guess, as Daniel Sprong was, although I find it hard to believe that he's not going to be one of the best 12 forwards on the Toronto Maple Leafs, who had the worst team.
He'll play for them, yeah. But I guess it's an option, and it's a weird rule, and it's there to protect the junior leagues in a way, to make sure that their talent isn't poached. But I don't understand in a lot of ways, like, what leverage does a junior league have if the NHL just says, you know what, we're not going to do this, we're going to send our guy to the A. You know, who makes those agreements, I guess, is what I'm saying there.
I don't know. I think it's just sort of a long-standing thing that I guess the NHL sees the Canadian Hockey League as a prime place for prospect development.
Sure, and it is.
And they want to have a positive relationship with that league as opposed to a confrontational one. But I agree. I think if the NHL said, this is really stupid and we're going to stop doing it, what's the CHL going to do? You know, so
that's the one thing baseball has, is the built-in, they have the organizational structure that, of course, hockey, it's a little different depending on your age, and I think each NHL team owns its own NHL team at this point, doesn't it? It's pretty close to that. I thought we were getting to
they
that
all
point.
Have their own AHL team, but they don't all own
That's
them.
what it is, yes.
So it's a little bit different. But back to the European thing for a minute. In the Penguins, they drafted like 5 European players last year. And so I'm interested to see if that trend is going to continue, that if Jim Rutherford thinks he is really on to something there with some European scouting or some sort of under appreciated players, especially for some weird places too. Germany, the Netherlands.
Right. With Sprong was the Netherlands, yeah.
So I'm interested to see if that continues, because that's one of those things where if it happens once, it's just a weird coincidence. But if you see, maybe a Latvian or something like that, I think that then it becomes something of a narrative there that the Penguins feel they have an advantage scouting from some underrepresented European countries. So I'm interested to see if that happens again.
And Penguins fans might remember under Ray Shero, it was almost all North American, almost all college guys or guys on the college track. But it had paid off. It has paid off. Connor Sheary. Well, never mind. He was a undrafted signee, so that's a different deal. But
Brian Rust, and,
Gensel, who I mentioned, not up in the show yet. Brian Dumoulin was a college player too. So it's just funny to see how these organizations change hands and then how they change their drafting tendencies and their player development. How that can keep up and try to make the most out of these young guys. So we'll keep an eye on the draft. It may be a while before the Penguins pick, like we said, but there should be some sort of activity to follow, and we will be doing so. We'll take a break on Gikes Got Game. Coming up, yes, we will get to the Pirates talk. We threatened, and we will deliver in the third period. What's going on with this club, and where can they go from here? Do they have to make a major adjustment in how they are trying to bring their best young players up to the majors? Talk to you in just a little bit.
Hi, I'm Mike Storr, host of the Awesome Cast, which you can hear right here on River's Edge Radio. We're talking tech, getting geeky every week with people from Pittsburgh in the industry. Go check us out, awesomecast.net, or listen to us right here on River's Edge Radio, Thursday mornings, 8 a.m. after Funny Money.
Third period time on Gikes Got Game. I am Matt Geitka. He is Alan Saunders, and we just spent the last half an hour or more discussing hockey because we wanted to put off the baseball talk for right now because it's a pretty sad tale down at PNC Park. Lately, the Pirates have lost 20 of 26 games going into their 4-game wraparound weekend series. There's a cliche that I like, wraparound series. It tells a story against the Dodgers, and then they'll head out west to Seattle and Oakland. But before we get to that, I want to kill a cliche that's baseball related, and it's something that you and I brought up in the press box on Wednesday. You wrote your story for PiratesProspects.com on the Pirates' inability to, well, you didn't put it this way, but the inability to manufacture runs. And I don't even know where to start on this one because we make situational hitting is what we're talking about, or I guess bunting, small ball. I don't mind the words or the term small ball. I think that gives you a nice mental picture of what they're trying to do.
As opposed to trying to score runs with a lot of extra base hits.
Yeah, long ball. So long ball, small ball, there's like opposites there. But every run is manufactured of the same stuff. You still have to you have to circle the bases and cross the plate. So that's where the manufacturing, I suppose it conjures up a thought of being deliberate. I don't know where this cliche came from, but I would like to kill it here.
Every run is manufactured,
from 4 bases. Yeah,
equally, and I think there's just I don't know where does it come from? Like how does that? We don't manufacture anything else.
Goals,
esoterically, like it's not like we use the word manufacture outside of its actual definition.
That's true.
Commonly,
right. It's weird. It's a strange one. Maybe it comes from the days when we actually manufactured things in America,
or when it was actual manufacturers playing the baseball. I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Some factory team, used to win 12-0 with a lot of bunts and hit and runs.
Yeah, so they decided to make it quite literal in that case. It reminds me of the team that beat the Riverhounds in the U.S. Open Cup this year, the Lansdowne boys out of Yonkers. They were a bunch of construction workers. They manufactured 2 goals in that game, you'd be able to say, with a little wink and a nod. So manufacturing
If you're going to use
runs,
it in that context, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that.
If you have an actual manufacturer on the team, it's perfectly allowed.
So every run is constructed of 4 total bases, whether you get them by a hit, a bunt, an error, or a home run, a double, a triple, anything exciting like that. Although I guess bunting and stealing bases, that's exciting as well. But manufacturing runs is this week's cliche that is being marched off to be killed. And as you know, every time I kill a cliche, it always hangs around anyway. So I think you called them zombie cliches a few weeks ago. So this is all ceremonial, clearly, and I'm just doing this for my own benefit mentally. But let's continue the baseball talk. The Pirates could not manufacture enough runs on Thursday to win, neither on
Friday
or on Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Whatever day of the week it is.
Or Tuesday, although that would have been a lot of manufacturing.
Yeah, that would have taken quite the raw material storage to put together enough to overcome the Giants. What was it, 15-4?
Yeah.
on Tuesday. So the Pirates have lost 3 in a row. I mentioned 20 of 26, also 12 of 14. I think that even sounds worse than 20 of 26. 12 of 14. That's 2 weeks with 2 wins. And
5 wins in the month of June.
Mm-hmm. And on only 4 days out of 23 this month, leading into Friday's game, they have come out victorious because they swept the doubleheader.
Oh yeah, so all their winning was contained to one day.
They like to spread that out, maybe, if they had the chance to do so, which, of course, they don't. The pitching continues to be poor, and you mentioned injuries. I do want to bring this up because it was mentioned in Clint Hurdle's pregame presser on Wednesday that Ryan Vogelsong is missed on this team. He was brought in for this reason, to make spot starts, to give you 3 or maybe even 4 innings out of the bullpen in some situations. And boy, could they have used him over the past month in that regard, because it's been falling apart at the front end with the starters not going deep and not being effective, and at the back end where so many middle relievers are getting overexposed. So I never thought I'd say this, but I think the Pirates really do miss Ryan Vogelsong over this stretch.
And if you look at his numbers, he's one of their better relievers.
Yeah, he has been
this season. So, yeah, I think he's been a hugely underrated loss for the team. And it's been, since he's gone out with his injury, the Ryan Vogelsong opportunities have come up over and over and over again.
Right.
You have, a starter go down with an injury. You have several starters not get out of the 4th inning. Those are the perfect times where Ryan Vogelsong comes in and he saves the bullpen, and the next day just happens like the next day happens. So many times in this stretch in June, Clint Hurdle has had to use relievers in ways he didn't want to use them, or had to use relievers he didn't want to use. How many times has he said so-and-so is not available, and at his press conference at 3:30, and in the 7th inning out-trots that guy just because they didn't have anybody else.
Right, and it's been ridiculous in terms of the player turnover on the 25-man roster. I was looking at, I was writing up my pregame notes yesterday, and I realized, oh yeah, they made a roster move. They called up Kyle Lobstein, and they demoted, who the heck was it? Wilfredo Boscan after his spot start. They've had about 5 or 6 guys that have just been on the Indy to Pittsburgh shuttle, and it's difficult to keep track. It used to be a roster move was a minor news item. Now it's just like a little thing that you just throw in at the end.
It happens every day.
It does. The
I
daily
thought it was
transaction.
extremely apropos that while I was waiting to interview Kyle Lobstein the other day, he was unpacking his bag. Because I think he's probably done more of that than pitch this month.
That's a cliche too. He's unpacking his bags, or pack your bags, you're headed down.
He was
to,
literally
Indy.
unpacking his bag that time.
You see suitcases rolling around through the Pirates clubhouse. So the imagery is vivid, whether it be on the field or off in this case. And I've been thinking the Pirates, and Neil Huntington has defended this approach, conservative. The Pirates don't want to push their top prospects, but with the way that this rotation has fallen apart with Garrett Cole's injury, with Juan Nicasio going to the restricted list for some unknown situation back home, and with John Neese, Jeff Locke continuing to just be, and Francisco Liriano to a degree, have continued to be unreliable on a start-by-start basis. When do you start thinking maybe we just push these guys up and see how they do, or even just to give them a spot start here and there, because it's going to be better than the alternative?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword in a lot of these cases, because guys like Liriano, especially, the Pirates are counting on in 2017.
Yeah, they need
2016.
him, right.
So they need
Long
him.
term.
They need him to figure it out. And Locke he's not great, but he's probably an option to be back also.
Sure.
And Neese has options. So I think really, if the Pirates don't get at least 2 of those 3 guys figured out, I don't think it matters whether they have
That's true.
whether they have Tyler Glasnow up here or not.
That is true.
They need those guys. They need those guys this year, and they need those guys next year. And I think that's one of the reasons why Neil Huntington has really given all of them a ton of rope, because I think his hands are a little bit tied. I mean, he could bring in a starter but that's going to be at the expense of one of those guys that's likely in the plan for next season. So he better bring in a starter that's going to be here in 2017 too. And then that you're talking about a serious opportunity cost at this point in the season to go get a starter that could be a this year and a next year player that's going to be an upgrade over what Liriano, Neese, and Locke have done it's going to cost something significant in terms of prospects.
Is the season already lost to you? They're 5 games under. They're 5.5 back in the second wild card, and it's not looking. This doesn't look like a rotation, I guess, to me that's going to grind through a couple of turns and give you a decent chance to win every time out.
I think I'd have a really hard time saying the season's lost.
Okay.
And it's still June. And 5 games, yeah, but I mean, God, they got to play 90 still. So
I agree, but there are many teams ahead of them now. The Rockies just passed them. The Dodgers are ahead of them. And I think the Mets hold that final spot. I had the standings pulled up earlier.
Miami's right there, too.
Yeah, the Marlins, I think, are a pretty solid squad. Yeah, I don't agree that it's lost. I just thought I'd throw that by you. But we're getting into the danger zone here. And
I think
I don't know what the options are.
Where Neil Huntington has to do something.
But what is it?
Well, I think the first something is Juan Nicasio to the bullpen. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen when he comes back from the disabled list. Clint Hurdle sort of suggested that the other day, then today wasn't so sure about that. I think they probably need to talk to Juan Nicasio first, but he's obviously not the caliber starting pitcher that a team that hopes to contend for the postseason can throw out there every 5 days.
I think he'd be a good reliever.
I think he'd be a very good 7th inning guy. Sounds about right to me. And really, when you look at the Pirates bullpen, they're badly missing one of those. They have, if you line it up from a season ago, you have Melanson, you have Watson, you have Hughes, you have Caminero, you had Antonio Bastardo and Joaquim Soria, and they've been replaced by Feliz and no one. And so there's that big hole right there where Juan Nicasio was signed to go, I'll point out, at the beginning in the offseason. And he needs to go there because that will help the bullpen significantly. A guy that you can throw out there for multiple innings, a guy that you can throw out there 3 days in a row, who can be generally relied upon to get at least 1 inning of batters out, will be a huge. And you're not using guys like Caminero and Jared Hughes in games that you're ahead.
Yeah, that you need to hang on to.
You need to hang on to. And then that's what happened to them on Wednesday night is, you send Jared Hughes out there for the 6th inning because, your starter can't get out of the 5th, and he gives up 2 runs. And that's going to happen sometimes when you're using a guy like Jared Hughes when for a full inning when you're ahead. That's not what his ideal role is. His role is keep the game close or come get a double play.
Yeah.
And
specialist.
And I think I personally have a really hard time piling on Jared Hughes because that's not what he's supposed to do. And the injuries and have put a lot of guys in that position. I have a hard time piling on Gregory Polanco for missing 2 catches, either of which he made probably lead to, if not a win, at least a very different game. Playing in left field one night, center field the next night, for the first time starting in both places this season. I think it's just not. That's not his job. That's not what he's here to do. And I think just because of the number of just, like I said, injuries and poor performances, Andrew McCutchen, which we haven't even mentioned yet, has just been awful. Today, Clint Hurdle demonstratively defended pinch hitting David Freese.
Yeah, that's right. That was a big moment.
Ahead of Andrew McCutchen, and he was right.
Yes, he was. He used on-base percentage, and he was correct. Freese is a better hitter right now than Andrew McCutchen is.
And that should tell you pretty much what you need to know about everything that could possibly go wrong is.
2 things from the offseason, maybe even leading into spring training. Number 1, John Neese doesn't appear to be any type of an answer. I know that he's had a better run recently, but when you trade Neil Walker for him, I know that there are options down the road, but I don't think they're going to be picking up those options. So the Neese pickup appears to be, I would call it a failure at this point. And Juan Nicasio pitched so well in the spring that maybe he threw everything off. I think Vogelsong would have been a better starter, even though a mediocre starter, but a better starter than Nicasio. But the Pirates, I think, felt that they had to reward him. He was so dynamic down there, and they didn't have to, but they decided to put him in the rotation, Vogelsong in the bullpen. And you go from there, and you see Nicasio being overexposed, and here we are where maybe if a couple things go differently in that offseason and Neil Huntington and his staff perhaps does a better job of scouting it or just trying to find a potential pickup that could help out the rotation better than what has been there. They're in a better position right now. They're probably not very many over 500, but I think they could be, they could at least be a little in a better shape and not in a complete tailspin in June.
I think the big obvious thing is that they needed one more arm. They needed to have Nicasio in the pen, Vogelsong be your long reliever, and there needed to be
one more,
and have one more starting pitcher of major league caliber that they could put out there and not embarrass themselves. Ideally, someone better than Jeff Locke. There needed to be another starting pitcher that could be the number 3 guy in case Nice fell apart, which he did. And so then if Nice is your 4 and Locke is your 5, that's not great, but it ain't awful.
Right now you have 2 Jeff Locks, essentially. Different style of pitchers, but same level of performance.
But with those 2 guys taking up really prime spots in the rotation right now, I just think there needed to be one more pitcher. And at this point, there's no way they can get that pitcher without either making 2 separate trades, like trade Liriano, and then you don't have to worry about the fact that you're losing Liriano for next season because theoretically you got something back for him, and then acquire a pitcher for the rest of this season. But to me, that doesn't seem to make much sense if you think you can still win this year.
It almost feels like
you're better
you're
off
throwing it out. Yeah,
you're better off just getting Liriano right. Which,
easier said than done.
And the other thing, somebody asked me, is there something wrong with him? Is he not healthy? This is Francisco Liriano. He's actually a little bit overdue to have just a strangely bad season. That's the reason that the Pirates were able to afford a top of the rotation pitcher in the free agent market, because he does this from time to time. It's not like it's something new.
And he's getting older, so he's not going to be getting any better either. That's one other factor to take into consideration. Final break. We'll bring it back for my final number and a tiny bit of golf talk before we sign off on the River's Edge. This is Gikes Got Game. Oh, the things we talk about off the air that you'll never know. Gikes Got Game wraps up. We head into overtime. And with that, I present my final number. I'm Matt Geica, Alan Saunders riding shotgun for the entire hour this time. Lucky you. You get, 4 times the Alan Saunders you usually do.
That's right.
On this program. So blame the Pirates for playing an afternoon game on Thursday if you don't like it. If you do, then there's more where that came from in the very near future. My final number is -5, as in the score that Dustin Johnson should have had at the U.S. Open in relation to par before a penalty stroke was added or taken away, depending on how you look at it, whether it be total strokes or relation to par. But a brilliant performance by a very talented golfer who had been knocking at the door several times and finally closed it out. And I don't know how much of a golf fan you are. You follow it pretty closely, right?
Yeah,
so
several tournaments.
At Oakmont, the scene was really cool to be there because fans eventually found out that Dustin Johnson was going to be issued this penalty stroke, I think erroneously, but that's beside the point here. They found out through some radios they had that were passed out that you attach to your ears so you can follow the coverage throughout the course. Even if you're on one hole, you know what's going on the other hole. Also, social media. They got angry at the USGA for issuing this penalty, or what was going to be a penalty, and they also got really behind Dustin Johnson. So it was a really cool scene, kind of a righteous anger type situation at Oakmont, and so Dustin ends up going to the clubhouse with a 5-under final score, making a birdie on the 18th. Does it in style. Penalty stroke doesn't matter. That's the final word on that. He wins by 4. Knocked down to 3, but it didn't factor in. He was just so good there. But the final number being 5 under, that's the rightful score that I will give him in the annals of history. That is what he shot, and it was a brilliant 4 rounds for him. And of course, that was softened by the rain, but still only 4 guys broke par. So what a performance there.
Yeah, and I think it's especially sweet for a guy that has been very close many times and is a very, very talented golfer. Has plenty of PGA Tour top 10s and wasn't able to really get that big win. And then to do it in that fashion, I think made it just so much sweeter. He wasn't in the clubhouse sweating somebody else's putt. This is a guy that maybe got a little bit of a reputation of being someone that shrunk away from that big stage. Maybe rightfully so, maybe not, based on his previous performances there's other good golfers out there. Sometimes you just lose. But I just think for a guy that sort of got that reputation as a guy who came up small on a big Sunday to then maybe get put in one of the biggest pressure situations in recent golf memory where, hey, here's your score, but not really. Oh, by the way, you have what you found out about the 12th. So you have 6 more holes. Don't blow it. That's a huge pressure cooker. And so I just think the way he just emphatically, puts that approach on 18 to 6 feet. And yes, I am the kind of golfer that can go out on Sunday in a pressure packed situation on the hardest golf course in the world and nail it. To me, I thought that was a huge moment for him.
He made some nice, I don't want to call them short putts, but those U.S. Open length putts, you get 5, 6, 7 feet for par. Knocked several of those down. The putter was the question mark. It has been the question mark for him just because he hits it so darn well off the tee and also hits a great amount of greens. That's the winning formula at a course like Oakmont where you can't stray. You've played it, you know that. It's from Media Day a couple of months ago.
It's extremely, extremely just unbelievably difficult if you're not in the fairway. And when I was actually looking, before the tournament at people that I thought might do well, Dustin Johnson's name was sort of right there at the top because you do have to hit the fairways, and especially on a wet Oakmont with the rough the way it was, it just put an even bigger emphasis on hitting the fairway. So you could get in the green so that you could make a birdie every once in a while because the greens had slowed down to something non-criminal. And
good way to put it.
And so, yeah, if you're in the fairway, but if you're in the rough and the rough's wet, the course actually plays harder if it's wet. If you're in the rough, it's only easier when it's wet. If you're tee to fairway to green, and I think that's why Johnson was the winner.
He took advantage of it. He outdrove the field by 20 yards on average. So the guy's long. He's straight off the tee in a lot of cases. In most cases, I think it was funny. The only couple of times, or two of the few times he missed the fairway was with an iron on number 2. So you might as well just bombed away and tried to reach that green, that short par 4.
Short.
Yeah, it's short, 300 some yards, 313 I think it was. So he could have gotten there maybe, but of course you take on a great deal of risk. I loved it, and I'm sad that. Well, I know the Open doesn't come around very often. That's a given. It'll be back in 9 years, which is about as frequently as you could expect it. But no real legit golf events in the Pittsburgh area in the near future. The seniors used to have that Constellations Major out at Fox Chapel near Oakmont. Used to be the 84 Lumber event, too, at Nemacolin Woodlands. That's gone. So when are we going to get a decent golf event on the regular back in Pittsburgh, I wonder?
I would. To me, I'd like the women to come. I think that would be something that Pittsburgh would really get behind on a maybe more regular basis. It's not like you need to have huge crowds
or a massive sponsor.
Yeah, or a massive sponsor to secure a women's tour event, but it's still very high-level golf. And Pittsburgh has some fun courses, like you mentioned, Fox Chapel. I think Quicksilver has had a senior event before.
I went to that one a couple of times when I was a kid, not far from my house.
And down at Nemacolin, so there's plenty of places to put one. So I think that would be interesting. I don't think Pittsburgh has enough people or enough wealthy people, which are golf fans for the most part.
That's a factor.
To really support a full-time big tour.
PGA Tour spot. Okay.
Event.
There's got to be something, I would think. Yeah. It struck me as odd that here's the Open, maybe on the greatest Open course in the country, and then all of a sudden
it'll be 10 more years before you get to see high-level golf in the city.
Yeah, it's odd, and I think we're a big league city, and there are some places like the Quad Cities out in Iowa, Illinois area that has a regular tour stop. So I thought Milwaukee has one too.
John Deere.
Yeah, that's the one that's out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're only there because John Deere is paying a whole lot
of
money.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. The money is important, as it turns out. That's also your final number. X amount of dollars needed to bring a PGA Tour stop to Pittsburgh. Thanks, Alan. Good stuff.
Anytime.
As always.
Again, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll bring you back into the studio. Always more fun when you're talking with someone that's in the room. I enjoy that immensely. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Enjoy Seattle. By
Oh,
the time
yeah.
you're listening to this, Matt will be headed to.
Not quite yet.
Not yet.
I'll be out on Monday.
Oh, you-
so
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You still got the weekend.
right.
But yeah, Seattle, good times.
Looking forward to that. And the dump that is the Oakland Coliseum. I'm kind of more excited for that than I am for Seattle, just to see how bad it is. I have a weird personality with that kind of thing, but at any rate, we'll be talking to you next week in some form or another. This is Gikes Got Game on the River's Edge, a new kind of radio. I like to call it a new kind of sports talk, and reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. We'll see you. For Alan, I'm Matt.